This past weekend, we finally had Archazias Island released, and it was a great weekend to be had. There were tournaments far and wide, kind of focused on the new metagame. It was really nice to see these cards come out, be played early and impactful, and see how the trends will affect the next few weeks of the metagame. Today, I'm only going to be covering one of those events. It's the event that we streamed over on Saturday at Encounter Comics and Games 51 player tournament. We have the full breakdown, we have the top 8 decks. We're going to be discussing that, and we'll also put the stream for that in the comments below if you want to go and check out some of the gameplay. But without further ado, let's look at the breakdown for this tournament. 51 players showed up this weekend, and it was a capped out tournament. The store could not actually hold another player. We were sold out for 2 weeks at a pre-sale at 48 players. The store was able to fit one more 4-foot table in there to get 51 as the max. Nonetheless, the breakdown for the tournament is as so: 13 Ruby Sapphire, 13 Sapphire Steel, 12 Amethyst Steel, 3 Amber Steel, 3 Emerald Sapphire, 3 Emerald Steel, and the remaining 4 were other. This event was very much a 3-deck metagame. However, when you'll see the top 8, it's not all of those numbers came out pretty well. Ruby Sapphire with 13 players did find a way to get 3 of them in the top 8. Sapphire Steel with 13 players found 2 in the top 8. However, for Amethyst Steel, 12 were played, but only 1 made the top 8, while 3 Amber Steels were played. 2 of them were found a home in the top 8. Other than that, everything else was kind of on the sidebar here. Emerald Sapphire did not perform very well. There was a match of Emerald Sapphire Mirror in round 3 on the stream. So if you wanted to check out some of those, there was an Ink Eye version and a non-Ink Eyes version. Emerald Steel also on stream one round, but not able to find a way into the top 8. And then some of the other decks were bouncing around. And the more interesting note about this particular breakdown, if I'm being honest, is actually a world that there were 0 Ruby Amethyst registered in a 51-player tournament. Not a single person showed up wanting to play Ruby Amethyst. And I think that's a huge thing, if I'm being completely honest, because Ruby Amethyst is normally a deck that people have just enjoyed for so long now, for honestly, basically since the start of the game. So set 7 coming out, 51-player tournament in our area, and not one person registered it. That's crazy. I'll be very excited to see how Ruby Amethyst did in other tournaments this past weekend, if there was anything that really popped out, anything that really stood out, because I couldn't believe that when I did the breakdown live on Saturday that there were actually 0 registered. Absolutely insane. But aside from that, I think that this was really healthy in a way. Obviously, we're used to seeing maybe a bit more diversity in numbers, but I think starting week 1, a lot of this makes sense. We knew Sapphire Steel was going to be very good. We knew it got the right new tools to kind of like put it into a tier 1 deck. Hopefully not a tier 0 deck, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Ruby Sapphire, again, just got the right tools. Sapphire Coil, very good. Turning on some other cards, very good. A couple of the decks playing some interesting and unique choices as well to kind of talk about in the top 8. And then Amethyst Steel just felt like a deck that didn't really change much, got a couple nice cards that you could consider, and felt like an okay choice in the field. But on this weekend, not really what happened. 12 players registered, 1 found a way to a top 8, where Sapphire Steel and Ruby Sapphire, each had 3 and 2. And the 2 Sapphire Steels, for what it's worth, were the 2 exact same 60 registered in the tournament. And we're going to break all that down towards the end of the video. But, I think that week 1, a lot of this makes sense. I think Emerald Sapphire not being successful makes a lot of sense. It's a deck that's really hard to figure out. They got a lot of new cards and a lot of new choices. So I commend the players for taking the leap and trying to make that deck work week 1. But even on stream, it looked like the decks were just kind of all over the place, making too many choices, and really just need to like buckle down and like figure out what they're going to do to have their position in the metagame. Everything else, nothing too crazy on stream. There was a lot of Ruby Sapphire, there was a lot of Sapphire Steel, so there was a lot of that to be watched. But for me, watching, everything kind of looked normal on day 1. I'm looking forward to actually going and watching some of the other content from the other streams that were held this day. But Here we are, breakdown number 1. Let's look into the top 8 decks. Hey guys, if you're looking to help support the Forbidden Mountain, there's no better way to do it than join the Climb. The Climb is a support tier on Metafy. It gives you access to guides, discounts on events, discounts on premium guides, and access to a private channel in our Discord as well. If you're looking to just up your game a little bit, get part of a community that really is trying to get better at Disney Lorcana. This past weekend, we even had a player that was in second place of this 51-player tournament that's been a Metafy supporter for months now. Huge shout out to me. We're going to talk about his deck soon. But again, if you're looking to support us, this is the best way to support us to get the most bang for your buck. Top 8 player Marcus from this past weekend was playing Ruby Sapphire. And here we can see a pretty nice curve of deck choice, really kind of well-rounded, understanding that like we still want Maui Shark because it can be so very good, and kind of just this well-rounded version of this list with playing 3 Sapphire Coil, 1 Ice Block, 2 Be Prepared, 3 Big Sisu, 3 Human Sisu, kind of just really utilizing all of the tricks of the trades to Ruby Sapphire. My one question about this is if this will remain to be the best way to build this list, if there really is a world where we can kind of afford to have actions and items and kind of get all of the best of all of the cards. I think it's a really tough crunch for numbers, but week 1, I kind of suspected a lot of the decks to look like this. I know the versions that our team played in the event were very similar to this, and it was not shocking to me to see this type of deck be successful. Marcus is a great local player, consistently successful in set championships and things like that, finding a way into top 8 and really not making too many unique choices here and just being this kind of stock list for week 1. I think this is just a really good list to say, hey, this is kind of what's going on in the set and making the best of the new cards on day 1. So while I do expect the deck to develop a little bit in the coming weeks, it really wasn't shocking to me at all to see this type of list be successful in week 1 of the tournament. Now we get to take a look at Stefan. Stefan, another great local player, picking up a top 8 finish. Ironically, Stefan wasn't even supposed to be in the event. He showed up and was the extra standing around. Someone didn't show up for the tournament, and Stefan was able to get into the tournament and be successful and find a way in a top 8. He actually finished 8th overall. He ended up losing the top seed, David Nunes, on the Sapphire Steel item Oswald deck. And, Stefan did something very similar as well. Some differences, some changes, but still playing cards like Medusa and Human Sisu, having the wonderful Tamatoa find a home in this deck. And I think it's a really interesting world to play Tamatoas with Vitalispheres, because now we're able to basically always have our Maui Sharks turned on, still playing a Hideaway, still playing a Let It Go, having the 3 Pirates Life, 0 Ice Blocks in this one, but still the 2 Be Prepared, 3 Sisu split. So that was very common in the first 2 Ruby Sapphire lists that we're checking out here. So definitely some different choices, definitely some different things that you can kind of mess around with. The numbers are all definitely up for debate at this point. It'll be very interesting again to see how this deck develops in the coming weeks. Amethyst Steel also picked up a top 8 finish this past weekend. You can see here this list, really nothing different, in all honesty. The truth about this list at the end of the day was Cobra was the one card that everyone was very certain they were going to end up playing. They felt really comfortable about it. And even in this list here, we only see 2 giant Cobras. Aside from that, this is a 58 card list that would have seen play in all of Azurite Sea. So Cobra just having a small addition to this, really just understanding that Pete was a clear 4 of in this deck. We're also making the choice of going back to 4 rabbits and 2 genies. We dropped an Elsa from 4 to 3, and we dropped our crabs down from 4 to 3. And I think that that's one of the more notable things that we're going to see here. I think that Sapphire or Amethyst Steel is very fair, in all honesty. And as opposed to some of the other decks that we already showcased and some of the decks we're going to be showcasing, I think that this deck doesn't really do anything at all that's unfair. It's consistent. It has a game plan. It understands everything it's supposed to be doing for every matchup, but it's not really going out there and just winning the game easily. This was on stream in round 4. This matchup, actually, he played against the Ruby Sapphire Stefan that we just showcased, where they had a matchup, and the only reason why this deck was able to win was because it was able to repeat. In game 2, I think he repeated 4 times. In game 3, I think he repeated 3 times. And it just like turned Maui Shark completely off and was able, like, not able to close out the game anyway, wasn't able to be prepared, was able to position itself that was like still strong against Sapphire Coil, because there wasn't a way to double ink and kind of like use 2 ink to then put a Sisu in play and remove the board. It was a very, very well played game and honestly methodical game for him to win, start 4-0, and then draw himself into the top 8. He did inevitably lose to the Sapphire Steel deck in round 5, in round 6 while they were playing for seeding, and then he also lost to it in the top 8 as well. So both of the Sapphire Steel players that were top 8 of this event were able to both beat this deck, I think potentially 2-0 if I understand correctly. So this matchup into the Sapphire Steel has some issues. Might need to figure that out. Might have to find a way to kind of compete with that, because right now, if you can't necessarily compete with that Sapphire Steel item build, then I don't know how reliable we are going to be in a metagame if it's dominated by that. So that's definitely something to take away from this particular event, and this deck in itself, of saying it was pretty good into the field. It was able to beat out the Ruby Sapphire field pretty well. I think it was able to contest itself against the Sapphire Steel mid-range decks, but that Sapphire Steel item deck that came out and was like basically untouchable in this tournament, this deck was one of the decks that really did just completely get banished by it, if I'm being completely honest. So huge shout out here. Great finish and finding a way into a top 8. Nice showing for Amethyst Steel of saying, hey, we still have a chance, we still have opportunity. Just maybe we got to lean more into what set 7 has to offer instead of just a few Cobras. Here we are with Vito finishing in the top 8 as well, with Amber Steel Mufasa. This is a list that is pretty interesting. I think that Mufasa is a pretty well-positioned card in the metagame if we can utilize him well. I like the idea that we are not really going too high. I do think on average for Mufasa, I'd like to be a little bit more greedy. As much as Happy is good with 7 Doors Mines, I probably just would not play Happy in this deck at all, and I would much rather have a couple more endgame characters that are a little bit more reliable off Mufasa, whether that be Tinkerbell, whether it just be like some other good Amber Steel option, like around 5 or 6, even a Chenpo, like things like that. I think that would be a really good position. Very interesting to see that only 3 Rapunzels. I think even in a world where Rapunzel is very difficult to get off, we still play 4 of her because she's inkable and her upside is just way, way, way too good. But, I think the key note here, and I think the most important thing, is there was a lot of talk and a lot of discussion around the community about having set 7 legal in week 1. There were 3 tournaments that were very successful around the world this weekend that enabled set 7 to be legal. Well, even in that world, this deck right here, 0 set 7 cards, made a top 8 of a 1.5K, walked away with some store credit, was able to get a box or something like that, be happy with that. And then we're also going to see later on that Amber Steel was the runner-up in this tournament, and they were able to be successful. So this deck has no new cards. We talked about it for weeks on the podcast, in other content. Like, Amber Steel didn't get any help potentially for some of the versions of this deck. I can't wait to break down the meta report. There's some very interesting new cards that didn't make top 16 or top 8 in other tournaments, but they're interesting to note that they were successful enough to talk about. I'm going to be talking about them in the meta report. But for today, day 1 deck, no set 7 cards, walked in, made top 8 of a tournament. These are always possible. It's not even shocking at all to think that this wasn't going to be possible. So just a huge takeaway. It's okay to have new cards in week 1. It's also okay to understand the metagame and say, you know what, this deck doesn't need anything. It's still very good. It was a tier 1 deck in the metagame previously. It's not going to drop out of the metagame and completely, especially as an aggro deck. Aggro decks are always powerful, always a good choice week 1. This deck, great choice week 1. Almost found a way into a top 4, just kind of like fell out of favor in its top 8 matchup, but still finding a way to a top 8 in a 51-player tournament week 1 is enough of a showcase that's saying, like, hey guys, if you haven't got 7-7 yet, if you don't like the prices of cards right now, I'm suggesting that this might be the best deck for you moving in a couple weeks. Maybe not necessarily Mufasa. We're going to look at another list of it in a second here, but a version of Amber Steel Aggro could be very well positioned in the metagame right now. Hey guys, very curious. There were Battle Bear, there was us streaming on Saturday, and there was also Southside Gaming streaming on Saturday. Well over 200 players playing in tournaments this past weekend with Set 7 legal. I'd love to know your feelings on the metagame right now. Do you like it? Is it unhealthy? Is something too good, something not good enough? Let me know in the comments what you guys think about in the first week of Archazias Island. I'm very curious to hear what the community is feeling right now. I know my feelings. I'm a little bit concerned. I'm a little bit worried about Sapphire Steel, if I'm being completely honest. We'll have to see how the next few weeks play out. But the games I watched this weekend were like very, very alarming, if I'm honest. If you didn't get to see any content, definitely check out our stream on the channel. I'll put it in the description below. But we had, I think, 3 rounds, maybe even 4 rounds of Sapphire Steel on camera. And man, like, did the deck look very interesting and very fun and very combo-ish? Yes. I do think that it's nice to have potentially a different type of deck be successful in Lorcana, but the solitaire feeling of it, I don't know, very, very difficult. So I'd love to know, hit me up in the comments below. Let me know if you like it, if you dislike it. While you're at it, guys, if you haven't yet, hit that like button on the video. Let's talk about the top 4. Top 4 competitor here, Eric Martin, finishing 51 players. Eric is a top 16 competitor from a DLC. He also is an NAC. He was an NAC qualified player and participated in Continentals. And he kind of brought a very interesting Ruby Sapphire deck. Of the 3 in top 8, this is definitely the most interesting. So the first card of note here is the 1 cost, 1 strength, 2 willpower, 1 lore Sapphire character, Monsieur Del Rock. And he has the ability, I've come to collect. Whenever this character requests, you may banish chosen item of yours to draw a card. So it's very much a mini Hiram. This is an interesting take on this. In this particular list, we have 12 items. We also have the unconventional item, which is the 1 cost inkable ruby item with the ability fixed in no time. When this item is banished, you pay 2 less for the next item you play this turn. So this is a bit of a combo, of course, with this. And notable here, we don't have any bells, right? We're not looking to play bell in this list, but we do have this, Monsieur, this unconventional tool. We're looking to put, potentially play Sapphire Coil for free. Any world where we can Monsieur on 1, kind of get him play, get him going. Turn 2, we might put to play a popsicle, draw a card, play an unconventional tool, quest with our Monsieur, banish our unconventional tool, draw another card, and then get our Sapphire Coil. I think it's notable that by doing it that way and kind of banishing it and get Sapphire Coil out early, we're at least still drawing cards. We're keeping our hand healthy, and we're kind of utilizing it to replace itself, which I think is cool. Any world where we can maybe get a lucky dime into play on turn 5 a bit earlier is nice, because we can kind of set up just a more nice way to play against the mirror and kind of just say like, hey, my lucky dime is going to be out earlier. It's going to start gaining me lore earlier. It's going to really cause you to like make decisions a little bit differently. So I think that was really interesting. Aside from that, we're not playing Bell. We didn't go that far, and I think that's correct right now. With the format maybe not being as aggressive, this deck doesn't really need to play the 3-cost Bell. So I think it's a really good choice. But Tamatoa, happy as a clam, definitely a standout this weekend in general. There were many copies of him in this top 8, as we're going to see some of the Sapphire Steel decks and what they were able to offer as well from this. But yeah, all in all, 3 different versions of Ruby Sapphire that were all very successful, finding top 8s and top 4s. Both of them ended up losing, or almost all of them ended up losing to the aggro. Stefan lost to the item deck, and then both Marcus and Eric ended up falling to Amber Steel aggro deck. So if you're looking for an answer to Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel aggro might be in the right position to do so. Now let's talk about me. Me is a great community member of our Discord. He's been part of the support tier for probably about 6 months now, and he's always asking questions, always trying to get better at the game. And this past weekend, he didn't have the ability to go and get cards for set 7 yet. He was like, I'm going to show up with my Amber Steel aggro deck. I'm going to just do my best and see what happens. And he found his way into a 2nd place finish, winning $300 in store credit and a Scar Set Championship playmat. Great showing by me here with Amber Steel aggro. Very interesting, very different from the previous list that we had seen. No Mufasas here, but we have the shift line for Robin Hood, and we also have Tiana. Tiana is the 3-cost, uninkable, 1 strength, 4 willpower with 2 lore, and the ability is when she's exerted, opposing characters must pay 3 to challenge her or your other characters. Very difficult to get rid of this card for most decks outside of just having Brawl or Sisu. So she definitely is a lightning rod for those cards. And after talking to me after the event, he actually came out to dinner with the team and we were chatting. And he said he really wasn't a big fan of the card at the end. So we probably would cut Tiana. So I wouldn't just go rushing out to go buy Tianas or anything like that. I think this deck can be successful without it. I think you can make it more inkable and still have the right threats. But it's also noticeable that we had 4 Benja in this list. And me talking about the event said he really did just decide, hey, how can I be successful in the blue-red matchups that are going to have Sapphire Coil? What do I want to do to answer those? And I think that 4 Benja is a testament to that. It's a 3-cost, inkable, 2/3 with 2 lore, and it just comes into play and banishes items. Even when it's not great and you don't get the enter play effect, you're still getting a 2 lore character for 3, which is a lot of the times what this deck wants to do. All in all, I still think this deck is very well positioned. I think some version of this deck will be quite successful. I'm a little shocked that there was no 7 Dwarf Mines. You might very easily just be able to take Tiana out, put 7 Dwarf Mine, and kind of just move this deck as is. I think there's a lot to offer about this list. I think it's very good, and there's a very good chance that it's very well positioned in the current metagame. Now let's take a look at the boogeymen of the event. David Nunes was first place overall in the tournament, going 5-0-1 in Swiss, winning his top 8 match 2-0 against Ruby Sapphire, and then inevitably losing in the top 4 to the mirror match, which was Braden. Braden here won the entire tournament. He also played very well. He had no losses on the day. This deck was flawless between both players. Its only loss on the day was the mirror match. It is the exact 60-card replica. Both players very successful, picking up what could be the breakout deck of the metagame currently. As you can see here, this deck is incredibly dominant, bringing out characters like Oswald, who has been waiting for basically 3 months now to say, hey, who is going to break me? What do I need to be successful? And the answer to that looks like Belle and Tamatoa, along with Scrooge. These are 3 new Sapphire cards that have gotten a lot of discussion around them. Are they good enough? What are they going to do? Everyone knew Tamatoa was going to be great. Everyone knew Belle was going to be great. Scrooge McDuck was just a kind of more of a role player in this deck. However, anytime you get to exert 4 items and play a Scrooge McDuck for free, go find another item, and now just have a 4/4 that can sing. And then along came Zeus if it wants to. It can just challenge if it wants to. Just a really, really powerful line here. Having Belle be either a singer or challenger early on in the game is nice. Picking up a couple chip damage is very important. Honestly, guys, this is a deck that watching it all day on stream, I'm going to go, and by the time this video is out, the timestamps will be in the stream for when this deck was on. I believe, it was round 6. It was round the top 8, and then also the finals were the 3 rounds you actually get to see this deck be played. I think it's only 7 games total. I believe it was a 2-0. Yeah, it was a 2-0 in the top 8. It was a 2-0 in the 6th round and a 2-0 or a 2-1 in the finals. So only 7 games, but you can really see across those 7 games how dominantly powerful this deck is and how it can win in different ways. David Nunes had a game where, he was on 2, and he untapped with a Tamatoa in play and gained 25 lore in 1 turn. And then there was another game where we were able to accrue 17 plus ink, and play a Tamatoa, gain 13 lore off Tamatoa, and another 4 off our characters in play, and win the game from 4. So this deck has so many different ways to just punish your opponent, really double down on the value of cards like Oswald, cards like Tamatoa, just to the fullest, utilizing Belle and Scrooge. In all honesty, this deck really did exist 3 months ago, but it didn't have Tamatoa. It didn't have Belle. We were playing cards like Sheriff of Nottingham And while Sheriff of Nottingham is it's really nice to go, oh, I'll pay 4 for like a 5/9 with 4 lore. It wasn't the same. It just wasn't. And you really have to see it to believe it. So if you want to check that out, go check the stream out. But we're also, myself and David Nunez are going to sit down and do an entire video on this deck, kind of talking about it, showcasing one of the games he played on stream, and really just going through of like what is powerful about this deck in general. And yeah, guys, this deck is insane. It won our tournament. It was the best performing deck in the room. There was only 2 of these decks in the room that day. They both made top 4 or better. They were both undefeated against the field. Only loss in the day was to itself. It also dominated another tournament this past weekend. It's scary. It really, really is. Great weekend for Disney Lorcana. Really nice to see set 7 come out and swinging. Whether or not it's scary, always debatable. For us, the Ultimate Guide, we had 4 different players play this past weekend in the tournament. We're going to have the tournament reports in our Ultimate Guide. That's really what this is, guys. This Ultimate Guide for us is it's a diary for the team. So it's going to be there every time we have a tournament, success or failures. I think it's always important to talk about failures. Some of the players went into this weekend. They were like, all right, Ruby Sapphire is my deck. I want to be it. I want to be successful. Amethyst Steel is my deck. I want to go in. I want to be successful. And maybe those things didn't really happen for them. I think it's important to hear those stories. I'm also going to do my best to write up a report of just what I watched this weekend. I was a commentator, but I was also a judge. I was also an event organizer in a way. I wore a lot of hats this weekend. Shout out to Encounter Comics Game for being an incredible host to this tournament. It was a huge success for them. We talk about this all the time. I actually wrote a report about it on social media, but this is a store that is committed to Disney Lorcana. If the store was bigger, I'm telling you guys, we might have had 100 players in the store this weekend. If we had the same size as Southside Gaming, we might also have been able to run, a 10K tournament and put 130 plus players in a room if we had the room to do it. Only have the room for 51. It was only a $30 entry, and first place was $600. Second place was $300. So really great event for $30. In a store that's very small. It's in the middle of nowhere, greater Philadelphia. From where I live, it's like 75-minute drive to go and participate in this tournament. But they are so committed to Disney Lorcana. And in all honesty, we don't have enough stores in a populated area, in a populated city such as Philadelphia. The idea that I can really only say that one store in a 2-hour radius of me is committed to guaranteed pricing, and it's committed to affordable tournament fees, and on top of that has a singles case. People were able to show up and buy the singles they needed to. We had win-a-box side events that had 20 players in it, so even though you weren't successful in the first 2-3 rounds of the tournament, you were able to just kick back, go and play in a 20-person side event, and try win a box that way. I think that no other store in our area is doing this, and I'm just pleading for other stores to give Disney Lorcana a chance. If you're watching this and you have a store in your area that's on the fence, tell them. Literally make a clip of this. Doesn't matter. Send it to them. It exists. This game has the chance to be successful. Players want to play the game. We want to play with new cards on top of that. 51 players, guys, played in a tournament. 130 plus players at Southside Game. I don't know the number of Battle Bear yet because I haven't done the research, but they also had a successful tournament, all set 7 legal. People want to play with set 7 cards. They wanted to start the game. They wanted to get back on the horse and play with new cards, and I think it's the same for every single set. It's a huge opportunity for stores. Local game stores are going to be the backbone of Disney Lorcana for the next however months until official organized play comes back. Get your stores. Tell them, hey, guys, we want to play. It can be successful. If you market it well, it will sell. This is a store, again, it's in the middle of nowhere, greater Philadelphia. And we had players from Delaware, from New York, from Maryland, from Pittsburgh, from Rhode Island. Like, players from all over drove down to play in this tournament. Huge success for the Encounter. I can never tip my hat enough. It's why I wear their hat. It's why I support their store. And I always will, because it's very, very important. So definitely tell your local game stores, like, guys, give it a chance. If you build it, they will come. Field of Dream style. I promise you, the Lorcana community just wants to play sets. They just want to play with cards. They want to have a reason to play the game over the next X months where we just don't know when official organized play will be back. Thank you guys so much for watching today. It was a great weekend for me hosting the event. Being a judge was nice. I actually made several judge calls around the Vanish mechanic, around Gantu was a card that really came up a couple times. So it was really nice to kind of like put my hat back on, be a judge on the day, be a commentator, which honestly was a lot of it was a lot of difficulty. I was doing a lot of things. I was helping a lot of people. So I don't know that I'm going to be able to do all of those things forever. It's kind of might just have to like pick one, maybe ask someone else to do commentary because it's just really difficult to do all of it. But huge shout out to Dick Burns for coming up and joining me this past weekend. Always nice to have fun with the team. It was a great event for us, kind of just finding an excuse to get together again. 7 of us in an Airbnb, hanging out, enjoying the weekend. Great dinner on the weekend, great breakfast, all those great things. I think it's huge. We talked about teams and why they're important a few weeks ago on the channel. And for me, it's my favorite time. I love going to tournaments. I love playing. I love commentating. I love being a part of it and just trying to help the game succeed. But going back to the Airbnb, going out to dinner with my team is always my favorite part. So huge shout out to them for supporting this event. Again, we had players drive 5 hours, 6.5 hours, all to come and support the encounter and honestly the Forbidden Mountain in general. So huge shout out to them. Love you guys so much. If you enjoyed this video and this report, I'm going to have a full meta report on the channel later in this week, talking about Southside Gaming, talking about Battleground, really discussing what the ramifications will be from this Sapphire Steel items deck that was so dominant in different tournaments all over the world. So thank you guys for watching today. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that like button. If you like this type of content and you enjoy the vibe, definitely hit subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video.